Hi, I'm Sabrina, your AI co-host. Welcome to part 9 of our Another Story of Us series. We are revisiting our ancient history, but this time, through 21st century eyes. Have we reduced ancient wisdom to just stories and myth, allowing truth to hide in plain sight? Join us today for the second segment of the Wars of Gods and Men, as we interweave ancient Mesopotamian and biblical texts to add color and understanding to the ancient wars of Mesopotamia and Egypt. And hear another story.
Thank you, Sabrina. Welcome, everyone. If this is your first visit, my name is Clay. And here at Fly Deep, Rise Above, we are one of countless channels helping to raise human consciousness. We focus on merging our best science, quantum physics, with our human experience of spirituality and the paranormal. Much of our focus is driven by ancient wisdom and mysticism. As noted by Sabrina, we are currently revisiting ancient history with a focus on ancient technologies and those who wielded those technologies. Hope we're all managing well, given the turbulent times in which we are living. There's a couple of ways to look at the world right now. One is through the lens of fear, which never results in a good outcome. And the other is to see things through the eyes of wonder, realizing that the only consistency in the world is change. And change is happening all the time. The change we are witnessing today is happening faster than at any other time in the history of our civilization. About 40 years ago, we entered the information age. That has resulted in raising human consciousness on a global scale. The vast majority of us have more information at our fingertips than we can handle. But much of that information includes the unsavory parts of our civilization. A myriad of untruths and misinformation has been and is being exposed on a global scale. That means the toxicity is on full display, and we are challenged with responding to it. Old systems are collapsing because we are changing, and our technology is rapidly changing as well. We now have the technology to transform scarcity into abundance. Abundance for all of us across this great globe. But old systems fall hard because those whom they enrich, those I think of as today's gods, will not let them go without a formidable struggle. For those of us who have a higher vision for humanity, a heart-centered vision, our job is to hold on to that vision of a new earth, a new way of being. And that will be enough to inform us of our individual role in this progression of change. We've got another fantastic Fly Deep experience today that will help open our minds to another story of us. Grab your headphones as Sabrina, Lucas, and Azra entwine ancient Mesopotamian text and the biblical Old Testament to tell the story of gods and men and the wars they fought together across the lands of ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. Strap in and let's fly deep.
Hi, I'm Lucas. Sabrina and Azra will join me as co-hosts today as we weave our way through the ancient wars of Mesopotamia, where so-called gods decided when and where wars would be fought and armed humans to fight their battles for supremacy over other gods and their lands. In our last segment, we learned how the biblical Hittites and the so-called mythical Trojan War intertwined, and how the Anunnaki gods of Egypt and Mesopotamia directed and fought alongside men in ancient wars of aggression. We learned how Yahweh showed up for Moses and the Israelites against Egypt, and how Amon-Ra showed up for the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II during his battle against the Hittites. In this episode, we go back 1,000 years prior to Ramses, to a time when man's wars against fellow men began. A time in Mesopotamia around 3000 BC, where the sons and followers of Enki and the sons and followers of Enlil enlisted and armed men to fight the wars between them that destroyed man's first great civilization and set the stage for the future wars of Egypt.
Hi, I'm Ezra. Let us turn now to 1,000 years before the time of Ramses, to Mesopotamia around the 3rd millennia BC, and to Sumer, where the bloody trail of man's war against fellow men began. We begin with the ambitions of a young man textbooks refer to as Sargon I. With the help of the great olden gods, Sargon was granted kinship and established the kingdom of Akkad. He ruled for 54 years, bringing captive kings in dog collars to
the gate of the house of Enlil,
at least once with the help of Ishtar. The Akkadian dynasty reached its peak under his grandson, Naram-Sin, whom the god Sin loves. Naram-Sin wrote that his conquests were possible because his god had armed him with the weapon of God. His downfall, however, was the result of going to war against the word of the gods.
His troubles began when Ishtar changed her plan, and the gods gave their blessings to
7 kings, brothers, glorious and noble. Their troops numbered 360,000.
They were coming from the area of today's Iran, invading the lands approaching Akkad. Naram-Sin was told by the gods to put aside his weapons, but instead, he sent troops into battle. On the 4th anniversary of the war, Akkad was succumbing to death and hunger, and Naram-Sin asked the great god Ea, aka Enki, to overrule his sister Ishtar and put his case before the other gods. The gods advised Naram-Sin to stop fighting and,
in the days to come, Enlil will summon perdition upon the sons of evil.
The peace lasted for about 3 centuries, during which time Sumer re-emerged as the center of kingship, and the whole of Mesopotamia flourished. But by the end of the 3rd millennium BC, Mesopotamia texts tell us that this great civilization, man's first civilization, succumbed to a major catastrophe as a result of the great gods sitting in council. It was a fateful event. The graphic depictions of havoc and desolation is lamented in numerous Mesopotamian poems, and it appears may also be echoed in biblical tales.
It took southern Mesopotamia 2 centuries to recover from the divine annihilation. By then, the center of power had shifted northward to Babylon under the supreme deity Marduk, aka the Egyptian Amon-Ra, a son of Enki. By 1800 BC, Hammurabi ascended to the throne in Babylon, and with the powerful weapon called Great Power of Marduk, he extended the Babylonian boundaries. But before long, Babylon had to share its might with a new rival to the north, Assyria, where the bearded god Ashur, the all-seeing, was supreme. The Assyrians extended their rule northward and westward as far as Lebanon under the umbrella of the gods Ninurta and Adad, sons of Enlil. By the 12th century BC, King Tiglath-Pileser I claimed himself king of the world, king of Assyria, king of all 4 regions of earth, which directly challenged Babylon.
Babylon was sacked by the Assyrian king Sennacherib in 689 BC. Its demise was made possible by its own god, Marduk, who upon becoming angry with its king and people, decreed that
70 years shall be the measure of its isolation.
Exactly as the God of Israel had later decreed for Jerusalem. With subjugation of the whole of Mesopotamia, Sennacherib was able to assume the title King of Sumer and Akkad. During his battles, however, Sennacherib did not execute destruction of Jerusalem as he had all the other lands. We recall from our previous video episode, Riders of the Clouds, that Jerusalem was Enlil's command center. The claim that a land or city was attacked upon the orders of the god Osher was not made in the case of Jerusalem. In effect, he only reduced the size of Judea by giving its outlying areas to neighboring kings. But was the attack on Jerusalem a whim of Sennacherib's own desire and not the wish of his god? It appears that it was his own decision, as we find the other side of the story in the Old Testament of the Bible.
2 Kings, chapters 18 and 19 of the Old Testament offers the full story of Sennacherib's encounter with Jerusalem. We learn that
in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, came upon all the walled cities of Judea and captured them.
he then sent 2 of his generals to Jerusalem, the capital of Judea. Verbal exchanges with the populace concerned the question of whether the Assyrian invasion of Judea was authorized by the Lord Yahweh, aka Enlil. The Assyrian general Rabshakeh led the conversation.
Yahweh did say unto me, Go up against this land and destroy it.
King Hezekiah's ministers pleaded with Rabshakeh to cease saying these untruths. The general was carried away by his own oratory, abandoned his claim to have had Yahweh's permission to attack Jerusalem, and went on to belittle the God himself. When Hezekiah learned of the blasphemy,
He rent his clothes and went into the house of Yahweh, and he sent word to prophet Isaiah, and the word of the Lord Yahweh came back through his prophet Isaiah, I shall defend this city to save it. And it came to pass that night that the angel of Yahweh went forth and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000, and at sunrise, lo and behold, they were all dead corpses. So Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, departed and journeyed back and dwelt in Nineveh.
According to the Old Testament, after Sennacherib returned to Nineveh, his sons Adramelech and Sharezer smote him with a sword and escaped unto the land of Ararat. Sennacherib's younger son, Esarhaddon, ascended to king of Assyria. Assyrian records elaborate on the story, telling us that Sennacherib had decreed Esarhaddon his successor, having his other sons take an oath on his order. The brothers, however, broke the oath, killing Sennacherib and seeking to kill Esarhaddon, but the gods snatched him away.
And made me stay in a hiding place, preserving me for kingship.
After a period of turmoil, the deity Ishtar escorted Esarhaddon to Nineveh to confront his brother's forces.
She broke their bows, scattered their orderly battle array.
And Esarhaddon wrote,
Upon her lofty command, they went over in masses to me and rallied behind me and recognized me as their king.
Esarhaddon and his successor's son, Ashurbanipal, attempted to advance against Egypt, employing weapons of brilliance that
blinded the pharaoh so that he became a madman.
Other inscriptions of Ashurbanipal suggest that this weapon was worn as headgear. In one instance, an enemy
was blinded by the brightness from the Godhead.
In another,
Ishtar, who dwells in Arbela, clad in divine fire and sporting the radiant headwear, rained flames upon Arabia.
We recall that Huwa from the Gilgamesh story had similar weaponry.
we also find references to a weapon of brilliance in the Old Testament. When the angels of the Lord came to Sodom prior to its destruction, the people attempted to break down the door of the house in which they were resting. So, the angels
smote the people at the entrance of the house with blindness, and they were unable to find the doorway.
As Assyria rose to supremacy, extending its rule over Lower Egypt, the Assyrian kings inflicted terror and punishment beyond the Lord Yahweh's intention. To this end, Lord Yahweh announced,
I shall hold to account the king of Assyria on account of the fruits of the growing haughtiness of his heart.
It came to be in 614 BC that Ashur, the religious capital of Assyria, fell, and in 612 BC, Nineveh, the royal capital, followed. Invaders from the north and east were joined by rebellious Babylonians from the south to topple the great Assyria.
The lands of the fallen Assyria were now open to exploitation of the aspiring kings of Egypt and Babylonia. In Babylonia, Nebuchadnezzar II inscribed that he was ordered by the god Marduk to march his army westward. In Jerusalem, the prophet Jeremiah reported that the Lord Yahweh decided to side with Babylonia and declared Nebuchadnezzar the instrument of his wrath against the gods of Egypt.
Indeed, I will send for and fetch Nebuchadnezzar, my servant, and he shall smite the land of Egypt, and he will break the obelisks of Heliopolis.
The Lord Yahweh also announced that because the people had taken worship of the Queen of Heaven and the gods of Egypt, Jerusalem too would be punished.
In the city on which my name has been called, the doom I will begin.
In 586 BC,
Nebuchadnezzar, captain of the guard of King of Babylon, came into Jerusalem, and he burned the house of Yahweh and all the houses of Jerusalem.
Yahweh promised, however, that this desolation would last only 70 years.
The king who would fulfill this promise and enable rebuilding of the Temple of Jerusalem was Cyrus. Cyrus was a descendant of a migrant leader, Hakam Anish, who led a group from the Caspian Sea area to an area along the eastern coast of the Persian Gulf called Anshan. Cyrus, Darius, and Xerxes were all descendants who made history as rulers of what was to be the Persian Empire.
Cyrus ascended to the throne of Anshan in 549 BC. During this time, the god Marduk was looking to restore his position as the national god of Babylon.
And he called out the name of Cyrus, king of Anshan, and pronounced his name to be ruler of all the lands. He made him set out on the road to Babylon, going as his side like a real friend.
Literally accompanied by the god, on a day equivalent to March 20th, 538 BC, Cyrus
held the hands of Bel, the Lord Marduk,
in Babylon's sacred precinct. On that New Year's Day, Cyrus's son Cambyses officiated the restored festival honoring Marduk.
When Cyrus died in 529 BC, he left his successors an empire that encompassed all the earlier empires and kingdoms except one. The only remaining independent land with independent gods was Egypt. 4 years after Cyrus' death, his son Cambyses defeated the Egyptians at Pelusium, then later at Memphis, the royal capital. He then proclaimed himself a pharaoh. In deference to the independent gods of Egypt, Cambyses knelt before their statues, accepting their dominion. In return, the Egyptian priests legitimized his rule over Egypt by granting him the title Offspring of Ra. The ancient world was now united under one king, chosen by the great God of truth and light and accepted by the gods of Egypt. And there was no more cause for wars of men or gods. Peace on earth.
But peace didn't last for long. Across the Mediterranean Sea, the Greeks were increasing in wealth and power, and stirring in ambition. In 490 BC, Darius I was defeated by the Greeks at Marathon, and 9 years later, Xerxes was defeated at Salamis. 150 years later, Alexander of Macedonia crossed over from Europe to launch a brutal conquest of all the ancient lands as far as India. But Alexander was not carrying out a trustworthy command of the gods. Having heard through legend that he was fathered by an Egyptian god, Alexander slaughtered his way to Egypt to hear the god's oracle confirm his semi-divine origins. The oracle confirmed his origins, but also predicted his early death. Like King Gilgamesh more than 2,500 years earlier, Alexander's conquests were thereafter motivated by a search for the waters of life. He died young and in his prime, and ever since, the wars of men have been the wars of men alone.
Oh, the source for this episode is Zecharia Sitchin's Wars of Gods and Men, the third book in his Earth Chronicles series. If we give these stories of both the Sumerians and the biblical texts more than just a passing glance, we may begin to see patterns that exist even until today. Have you ever wondered why war is so ingrained in our psyche that we embrace it as a part of who we are? The question is of particular importance today, in 2025, an era of impending abundance. The technology is already here, and it's about to explode, even more so than in the last 10 to 15 years. But these so-called gods had technology far beyond that of ours, yet they still saw fit to rival each other for what? Dominance over the other, and in so doing, dragged humans into their battles and their consciousness. It appears that their consciousness is now our consciousness, at least in respect to dominance over the other and the acceptance of war as a way of life. Even our futuristic movies are more often than not stories of battles in places that look to be of infinite abundance. I'm not convinced that conflict at the level of killing each other is inherent to our nature. I think it could be a learned behavior over long periods of time. So much so that now it is in our DNA. But DNA can be rewritten, and we are quickly advancing to a time when an enormous opportunity to accelerate that process will be before us. Artificial intelligence, AI, is about to change the landscape. And the time frame is only 2 or 3 years from today, if that long. It will be highly disruptive, replacing human work on a large scale. But it will also bring unparalleled efficiency in all major sectors of human endeavor: energy, medical, healthcare, agriculture, transportation, and many, many others. Will we recognize the abundance this technology is bringing? Or will we allow the consciousness that sends men and women to slay one another on the battlefield to use this technology to continue projecting incoherent and destructive behaviors? Your participation in the universe is critical. In our next video, we'll meet some of the preeminent Egyptian gods such as Thoth, Amun-Ra, Horus, Osiris, Isis, and others. Our focus is moving to Egypt. Always remember, love is the fundamental force of creation. Keep a smile in your heart and share it with everyone open to receiving it. It is much needed. The light in me honors the light in you. Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. Till next time, namaste.